All right, welcome. And at your table, you should see an index card for each one of you. If you could go ahead and grab it and write your name on it. You can see my example up here on the board. So align it vertically and then just write your first and your last name. And then I'll come and pick them up in just a minute. While you're doing that, let me go ahead and tell you about myself. My name is Rebecca Branca. I have been teaching here. This is the start of my 4th year at San Jacinto Valley Academy. It's my 16th year in education. I am a science teacher. I've taught a variety of different subjects and different grade levels, but currently I teach chemistry and anatomy. I'm also one of the high school deans, so if you need something throughout this year, myself and Mr. Moore could be great resources. If you need us to sit in on parent-teacher conferences, if you're having an issue with a parent or a student, just let us know because we're here to support you. I really think that classroom management is vital. We need to get off to the right start with our students. So it's so great that we're able to spend this time during our teacher orientation to work on classroom management. A lot of the information that we're going to go over today is from the book called Teach Like a Champion. Each one of you new teachers will be receiving this booklet. It has a lot of great ideas, and I've just selected a handful of them, but it has so many more ideas that I just couldn't include based on time. But this will be a great resource for you as you're starting your first year here at SJVA. Some of the things that are really important is just to show students that you care. Having that relationship with them, building that relationship, learning their names, having a handshake with them every morning, seeing what they're interested in, seeing what motivates them, that can just really be a huge impact in a student's life. Another thing that's really important is to be firm but fair. I know students are always judging if something is fair or not. That's one of their biggest complaints is, this teacher wasn't fair. They let this kid do it, but not me. So it's really important that we set the expectation and then we follow through on it consistently. Another thing that's very important is to not waste time. We need to be able to go from bell to bell. We don't have a bell system here, but we need to, at the beginning of the class period to the very end, we need to be utilizing that time and making sure that we are getting as much as we can packed into that. Another thing that I feel very strongly about is teaching the students, modeling it, and then giving them opportunities to practice it. I did mention this earlier about being firm but fair, but setting those expectations, letting kids know what you expect, what you want from them, what their papers should look like, handing them a rubric so that way they know exactly what's expected of them, and then just following through on it. It's really important also to create a respectful learning environment. So that's not just how we treat the students, but also the type of behavior that we expect from the students. How are they treating each other? How do they treat the classroom? How do they treat the support staff? So just making sure that we're all working together and having that respectful environment. My own children have taught me this. If you say it, mean it. So in disciplining my own children, if I say, if you do this, this is going to happen, then I have to follow through on it. So that expectation is set out, and then the follow through is there. And then most importantly, we need to make learning fun. It can't just all be rules and guidelines. We do need to make sure that we're engaging the students, we're tapping into their interests, and we're giving them different opportunities to show us what they know. From the book, one of his techniques is called 100%. What I would like you each to do is take a minute and scan through this slide and underline some key words that you read just from this slide in your handout. All right, so I've already collected the class cards. Each one of you has your name written on it. So I'm just going to pull from these at random, and then I would like you to tell me what some of the keywords were that you found interesting. So let me see. First, I'm going to call on James. Oh, wait, he had to step out to the bathroom. Let's see, who's next? Roberta, how about you? I liked how you said you have to have a positive tone. I think that's really important. I like that, positive. All right, so Roberta, you said that you underlined the part about having a positive tone. Yes, that's very important that when we're asking for 100% compliance from our students, we need to make sure that we are positive, we are warm, we are upbeat, but we do have that expectation and we hold to it. We are firm in our expectations and we make sure that when we say it, we mean it. A lot of times we do need that silence, that wait time to make sure that all eyes are paying attention and that we are ready to go. We're ready to give instructions. If not everyone is listening, when we give instructions, then you're going to be answering 10 questions of what do we do now? So if you wait for 100% compliance, you can make sure that everyone has heard the instructions and they're ready to move on to the next thing. With 100% compliance, it's also best to use the least invasive form of intervention. So that could just be standing quietly at a specific spot in the classroom until everyone is aware of what needs to be expected of them. If that doesn't work, you could use an audible cue. Maybe you have a bell that you could ring that would get their attention, making sure that everyone is there. If it's just one kid in the back that still isn't paying attention to you, hasn't picked up on any of these cues, you can walk over to him, and just your presence a lot of times can encourage that compliance. If that isn't enough, then you could just lean in quietly and just say, I need your attention. And so again, just trying to use that least invasive form. You don't want to put somebody on the spot, but again, you do need that 100% compliance. Being firm and calm are some of the best things that you can have. And it's also really important to try and take yourself out of the equation. Instead of putting the focus on yourself, put the focus on the students. So in the example here, it says, instead of saying, I ask for your eyes on me, because when I ask you for something, I expect you to do it. To your average teenager, that is a pretty hefty phrase, and I don't think that they're going to want to. They're going to want to have that little rebellious streak in them. But if you say, I need your eyes on me so you can learn, you're putting the ball in their court, and now it's about what they need to do and not focusing the attention on you. So you want to make sure that you're helping the students succeed, and the way that you phrase things puts that emphasis on it. If you're saying, all eyes on me, and you see students who are obeying, just emphasize the compliance that you can see. If you ask them, I want everyone paying attention, that's very vague. But if you say eyes on me, you can look around and see if everyone is looking at you. You could take it a step further and say eyes on me and pencils down. So that way they're looking at you and their hands are not being distracted by what they're holding. And then you could also thank the students that are following your instructions, So you could go around and name the students who have already given you that compliance, and it's an audible cue to those kids that need to catch up. Another great thing to do is called do it again. We do this a lot with our entry routines. If the students don't get it right the first time, then they need more practice. So when students fail to successfully complete a task, the best consequence is to ask them to do it again and give them pointers about what they messed up on the first time. And so this can be helpful for those transitions in between activities. There's a couple reasons why this technique is really effective. It gives the students immediate and logical feedback. If they come into a room, they're loud, they're talking, they don't have their supplies, you can just look around, say, I'm sorry, class, that was unacceptable. Let's do it again. And then take them outside and remind them again of what the expectations are and give them another chance. Most times, just that second run through will be enough that they'll figure it out and they'll work through it and they'll come in together and have met your expectations. If it doesn't, then do it a third time. You just need to keep practicing with them, showing them what they need to do until they get it correct. So it sets a standard of excellence, and it shows the students what success looks like. It's very clear when they've met that expectation. It doesn't add any extra work onto the teacher. You're not sitting here writing out detention slips. You're not holding kids after class. But it does hold the whole class accountable. So when you do it again, the whole class is like, oh, get it together. And so they have that positive peer pressure kind of going. You can use this technique repeatedly, and you just keep doing it until the kids master that success. So the entry routine, I've already mentioned it. Here at SJVA, our expectation for the entry routine is that because we don't have bells, the teacher is the one who sets when the class starts and when the class ends, but it is based on a bell schedule. Each period has a start time and end time. So when the teacher is ready for the class to begin at 7:15 in the morning, opens the door, the students are to be lined up into 1 or 2 lines based on the size of the ramp, and then they should have their materials out and ready. Their backpack should be hung on the hook outside. There shouldn't be any food or drinks. They are to enter the classroom quietly, and then there's going to be something waiting for them inside the classroom for them to work on. Maybe it's a warm-up or a bell ringer, something that they can do now. So the expectation is when the teacher opens the door, the students are ready to come in quietly. They have their materials. Our cell phone policy here is that students can't be using their cell phone during the day. They either have to put it in a basket that the teacher has, or they can put it in their backpack, or they can keep it on them, but they can't touch it, they can't mess with it, it can't make noise. So as the teacher opens the door, she's holding the basket, or he's holding the basket for the cell phones, and this teacher welcomes the students. You're kind of visually scanning for dress code issues. You're greeting the students by name, maybe a compliment here and there. But whatever you do, it needs to be consistent for each student. So if you're going to compliment the first student, you need to compliment the other 23. If you're going to say hi to the first student, you need to say hi to all 23. So just make sure that you're not skipping anybody. That can lead to hurt feelings on the side of the students. So open the door, hold your basket, greet each student as they come in. If they came in quietly, went straight to their seat and started working, then great. We don't need to repeat it. If someone's messing around, someone brought food in with them, someone has a cell phone out, do it again, okay? Students should know where to sit. So if it's the first day of school, you should have a seating chart present for them, or let them know that it's open seating. That's up to you. They should have a do now. So whether that's a warm-up that's being projected onto your smartboard, or it's a worksheet that they pick up on their way to the class, it needs to be predictable. You need to get these procedures in place as you start out the school year this year. So at the threshold. At the threshold is where you set that expectation. That's the tone that you set for your class when the students begin, when they enter your class or when you begin a lesson. So the threshold right there at that door helps make sure you have that right tone straight from the beginning. So if your expectation is for them to enter quietly and orderly right from the door, then that's how you want your classroom to run, and that will be the expectation that you have set for them. If you greet the students physically there, it allows you to establish a personal connection, and it also helps reinforce your expectations. All right, and then it's really important once the students do come in that they have an activity on the board that's waiting for them. It helps you because they're busy working on something. It could be a review from the previous day's lesson. It could be a free write about something that they're learning about. It could be questions that they have about the current topic that we're studying. But what it does is it allows you a chance to take roll, to catch up with the students who are absent, to maybe quickly check on a kid to see if he has some missing work to turn in. And it just gives you that opportunity to get things done while they're working on it. So some of the characteristics of a do now is that it needs to be quick. It shouldn't take them longer than maybe 3 to 5 minutes to get it done. It needs to be done independently. So if they haven't learned the material yet, that's really not a good choice for the do now. It needs to be something that they can be successful at. It should include some type of writing. They need to be able to put their ideas down on paper and have something that you can track. So did they do their do now every day this week? So you can hold them accountable. And usually the characteristics of it is it will preview the lesson. So maybe they're reading a short excerpt and then responding to it, or they're reviewing. So they're looking through their notes and answering questions from what you studied the day before. All right, so to create an inviting classroom, it's really important to stay organized. At home, my life may be a little chaotic. I might not be the most organized person, but in the classroom, I try to be as organized as possible. I have color-coded folders for each class that I teach. I have specific locations where I keep, classwork, absent work, work to be passed back. I try to make sure that when students hand me papers, they know that it's not going to get lost in the shuffle somewhere. They know exactly where to turn papers in. They know what's expected of me, and they know that it's not just going to get lost in the shuffle on my desk somewhere. So it's really important to stay organized. Each one of us has different strategies and techniques that we can use to stay organized. Some of it is just, time management. How do we spend our time after school? What do our lessons look like? Do the kids know what to expect each day? Do we run our class predictably? All of those can really help the students feel secure. It is really important to keep your classroom clean. If you care about your classroom, then your students can pick up on that, and they'll care about how you keep the classroom as well. And they can work with you. Students can come in and they can wipe down the desks to help keep them clean, and they are buying into it. We clean up the floor at the end of class to make sure any little bits of trash are thrown away. We stack the chairs neatly. We push in the chairs at the end of class. So these are all signals that I give to my students that I care what this classroom looks like, and we're all working on it together to keep it clean. Decorating the classroom that I'm in is a science lab, and so there's a lot of cabinets on the wall. So I really don't have a lot of space to decorate the classroom, but I do have the lab stations labeled with colorful posters. Each lab station is designated a certain number, and those are colorful. The schedules that I have on the board do have color, and I have a lot of posters that are like encouraging little sayings and things about science. So it's really great to give students something to look at. It also is very it's very gratifying to the students to see their student work displayed. It shows that you cared enough about what they created to display it. You can also put the objectives underneath their work, so that way when administrators are coming through, they can see exactly how what the students are producing ties to what you were teaching. If you have windows in your classroom, open up the blinds and let in that natural light. Keep the lights on. It's best from a classroom management point of view to know what the students are up to. And if you can't see what they're up to, you don't know what they're up to. There's a lot of temptation to mess with people, poke you because the teacher can't see me. So just leaving the lights on, keeping it nice and bright, gives that signal that we're here, we're ready to learn. Don't double layer bulletin boards. That's a fire marshal standard, and we'll go over that later as we get into other trainings. But yeah, there are specific guidelines that the fire marshal has that we do need to adhere to. And let your classroom show your personality. Because I teach in a science classroom, I have a lot of science posters and some science humor going on there. But different classrooms will have a different feel to them. We do have a lot of teachers who are sharing classrooms this year. So, maybe if each teacher can kind of carve out a space on the wall where they can have things that are important to them. That's just something that you need to negotiate with the teacher whose room that you'll be in, and just letting you have that little piece where you feel like, yeah, this is mine, this is where I can kind of demonstrate what I'm about. And it's important to let the students be involved in the classroom environment, and that could go with the student work or in my room, I have the kids create pictures to represent the safety rules that we adhere to, and I have those posted around the classroom. So they're actually helping me decorate my classroom. All right, procedures. There's a lot of procedures that we do want our students to be aware of, and if we can get these running like clockwork with our students in the first week, then our entire year is just that much smoother. When we are, if we have to be absent and there's a sub, if our students already know what's expected, then we can just let the sub know that the kids know how to do this. This is what the kids will do. And that just makes things run smoother even when we're not there. So some of the procedures that we need to have are the do now. And I'm going to have you guys work on this collaboratively, coming up with some ideas for each of these. But so the do now would be like a warm up or a bell ringer, something that the kids can work on right after they come in while you're working on attendance. It's really important to use timers. If you say to the students, you have 5 minutes to get this done, and then set a timer. It holds you accountable, it holds them accountable. As teachers, sometimes we'll get caught into a discussion with one of our groups or something, and we'll lose track of time, and then the students can get off track, and then we're losing that instructional minutes that we have with those students. Timers can also be helpful if we want our kids to talk about what we've learned recently. We can set a timer for 1 minute and talk to your table partner about what you've learned. Set a timer for 1 minute and come up with questions that you have. So timers can really be a great resource. We do have little kitchen timers that are really easy to use, and they have a nice big display. You can even use PowerPoint timers. There's a lot of resources that you can use, but setting a timer is a really great way to keep your classroom running smoothly. Quiet signals. So how do we get the class to be quiet? Different teachers can use different things. I want you guys to brainstorm some of those quiet signals. Turning in work. Some teachers will have file folders where all of their students' works go based on their class period. And then they'll have like an out box as well. So when classwork needs to be returned, it's broken down by class period. Passing out work, how do you give work to the students? If you have a table or a desk that the students will walk by on their way into the classroom, they can, grab it as they walk in, and then you're not having to pass it out to all 32 kids. They pick it up on their way to their desk, and it saves you a step. Same thing with Chromebooks and textbooks, journals, and books. One thing that IT has asked us to do this year is the Chromebooks are already numbered, but they do want us to assign each student in each class period to a specific numbered Chromebook. That way, if there is an issue with the Chromebook, there's a little more student buy-in, knowing that they're actually being tracked on which Chromebook they're using. It's their responsibility to return it to the right location and plug it in. So if you just look at your roster and come up with that list, it could be alphabetical, it could just be based on their seating position, but you do need to have each student assigned to a specific Chromebook. There are a couple hand signals that the kids already are aware of here. If they raise just their pinky, that means I have a question. If they cross their two first fingers, their index and their middle finger, and they put them in a cross like the letter R in sign language, they're asking if they can go to the restroom. And that's a really great way. If you're in the middle of a discussion with the class and somebody puts up the R for restroom, you can just nod yes or no. And then they can just go sign out, take the pass, go to the bathroom, and come back, and you haven't lost any momentum in your discussion. Another hand signal, they could bring like an imaginary cup up to their lip, like they want to get some water. Again, a simple nod, yes or no. They could put their hand up to their nose, like they need to use a tissue. You can nod yes and point them in the direction of where the Kleenexes are. So that way, again, you're not wasting any minutes calling on people when you think they have a question and it's just, I have to go to the bathroom, I want a drink, I have to blow my nose, and then you'd lose that momentum that you had. Classroom jobs are another really great way to save yourself some time. You could have somebody who is the technology manager, so they have to oversee the students returning the Chromebooks, and they help make sure that they all get plugged in at the end of each class. You could have somebody who is the floor monitor, so they go around and they check around each desk and make sure that all the papers have been picked up. You could also have somebody who's responsible for passing out homework or passing back homework that's been graded. You could have somebody who keeps track of who's absent and make sure that they get the work from the day before. So those are all really good classroom jobs. And then what does your exit routine look like? For my classroom, I have about a minute before the class is scheduled to end, I have an audible cue come on. It's a timer that's set up on my computer, and it plays the Mission Impossible theme. So it's a 30-second clip of that sound, and what it does is it tells the kids it's almost time to go. It does not dismiss them. But when that 30-second music clip is going, that is a signal that it's time for them to get up, return the Chromebooks, return the calculators, if they moved a chair, to put it back in the right spot, and just clean up after themselves, get their stuff together so that when I do dismiss them, they have everything they need together and they're ready to go. So then once the music ends, I have 30 seconds before I'm supposed to release them, and then I can go over important reminders with them. I can let them know about upcoming assignments that they have due, when their next test is, and so it's just a really good way to kind of finish up the day. And there's a lot of other great ideas out there as well. So just be thinking of some of those ideas. Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to group you based on the tables that you're sitting at. And I have a different job for each table. And I've already put the labels on each large piece of paper, and your job is to come up with as many ideas as you can on this poster for your topic. And then we'll take a break and I'll take pictures of the posters that you've created, and that way you'll be able to share what you've learned. Okay, so go ahead and take 1 minute to list out as many things as possible on these papers in front of you. All right, ready, go. All right, great job. Thank you for working together on those posters. I was able to take some pictures of them and just paste them in here to this PowerPoint while you were at your break. So let's just go over and see what some of these groups wrote about, what some of their ideas were for some of these different topics that we had. So the first one was on distributing materials. So having student helpers, so having a set job of a student who would distribute the materials. Another person wrote down having a table leader. So if you have a group of students, sending one kid to get the materials, that's great. Having the materials ready to go in the student folders at the start of each day, and they can get the folder from their cubby when they walk in. That sounds really great from an elementary perspective. At the high school level, there's a lot of movement during the day. And so again, just figuring out what's going to work best for your classroom environment with your age level kids. They could pick up upon entering the room, and it could be just a specific table location where they're grabbing their materials as they head to their seat. You could have a supply closet where kids go, and you could have helpers that go pick up those materials. That's a great idea. King and queen of the day or squad leaders, again, designating those kids that are going to be your go-to people that day. That's a great idea. All right, class jobs. So this team, some of the jobs that we want our students to take over for us. Pass out materials. Great. Yeah, we mentioned that in the previous one. Taking role. Being a secretary. So when the phone rings, they go grab it for us. I like that idea. A line leader. A tech helper. So somebody who's going to keep track of our technology, like the Chromebooks. A timekeeper. So that's a great idea, having the students be in charge of the timer, having them keep track of it. Cleanup crew, so somebody's going to come in and look at the floors before they're dismissed. Chromebook crew, even having each person with a specific job. That would be really good to validate those kids each day. Someone could be in charge of the lights or the papers or the trash, and then the librarian to look over the books that you have in your classroom. Those are all great ideas. All right, as far as what we want our students to be able to work on as they're due now, independent reading. It's really important that our kids are reading. Some of our incoming students have a really low Lexile levels, and so the more that we can get them reading, that can only help them in their comprehension. So that's a great idea. You could have a writing prompt of the day, just display. That's quick and easy, something that they can work on independently. A warm-up, that's a great idea. A review of yesterday or the previous work, great idea. A free write or a journal prompt. Yes, so again, something they can work on independently. An entry slip or something in their notebook, that would be a warm-up. Again, those are all things that they know how to do it. They can come in, they can get to work, and you can take care of the other little issues that you need to take care of. Those are all great. Turning in work. How do we want to be collecting our work from our students? So you could have color-coded subject folders with each name. So that way you could just have it kind of set up at the back of your classroom and they just place it in their folder. You could have the table captains check and collect the work for the teacher, and then they would be the ones telling you who hasn't turned in their work. So then you're not having to figure out who didn't turn it in today. You could have bins for each subject area. So that'd be more of an elementary idea. At the high school level, you could have a bin for each period that you teach. Sometimes it can be really great to stamp the student work as you're checking it in. That way you know exactly when you received it. And then if you have a parent-teacher conference, you can make sure that you and the student and the parent all know exactly when they turned it in. Pass to the back and then have a student helper pick it up and bring it up to you. That would be great. And having bins with pins on the container. So you place your pin on your work, and then anybody who's left behind, you would know right away. You could see, okay, there's 3 students who haven't turned in their work. That's a great idea. We could use class numbers. You designate each kid a class number that could also tie in with the Chromebook cards. Quiet signals. Since our mascot is the wolf, the kids make a little wolf with their fingers, and quite a silent wolf. You could have one hand in the air or a thumbs up. You could do kind of a clapping, like class, class, and then they respond back, yes, yes. That would work. The shh sound. You could have some kind of a beat going. Or you could just designate, okay, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Those would all be great quiet signals. All right, we mentioned the importance of timers previously. Using a timer for all class activities is one of the best ways to maximize that instructional time. It creates that sense of urgency. They have a deadline. They need to get it done. They can't procrastinate on it. It also increases the productivity because they are actively working on something. And then as a teacher, it holds you accountable. It keeps you on that pace. It makes sure that you're able to get through what you need to cover in that day, and it helps you just be aware of exactly where all those minutes are going for your time management. So it's really important to have these tight transitions. So if they're moving from an activity to a different activity, or if they're moving from a physical location to another, that's time where you're not able to give them their instructions. They're not learning at that time. Here's an interesting thing. If you cut 1 minute from every 10 transitions a day, at the end of a year, you would gain 35 hours of instructional time. So that's huge, especially if you're having kids work through centers and you're losing minutes each time they transition. This can be a really big gain for you. So teachers should make sure that students learn, practice, and master procedures like how to line up or pass out papers in under 30 seconds. So get those really tight transitions during that first week of school. And so what we need to do as teachers that first week of school is teach our students. We need to have a clear idea of what our expectation is going to be able to model it and teach it to our students, have them practice it multiple times in that first week. So that way it just runs like clockwork for the rest of the school year. Okay, some additional ideas for quiet signals. You could have a bell, you could have a hand clap, a countdown, a specific hand signal, or you could even have music that kind of lets them know, this is when the music ends, we need to be on task. There are so many ways that you can do this. Just pick 1 or 2. Don't try a different signal every day, because that's just going to confuse the kids. They're not going to know, okay, yesterday it was a bell, but today she's clapping. What does that mean? It's really important to just pick something and stick with it. All right, to turn in work, here's one example. So you could have, this would work either by subject area for elementary, or it would work by period for high school or middle school. So you could just have on the left-hand side, you have all these little bins where students can place their work in. They could turn it in as they enter the classroom. They could turn it in as they leave the classroom. That would be one way to eliminate some lost time there. And then on the right-hand side, you could have a student volunteer or somebody whose job it is to grab the work for their period and pass it out. So that could be one way to do it. Distributing the materials. Again, we do need to have a consistent check-in and check-out procedure for accountability. Again, like I said, IT does want us to assign a specific Chromebook number to each student, either per classroom or per period, so that way it's just a little easier to track, and they're held accountable. They know that we're watching and that we expect them to use a specific number and take care of it and return it and plug it in so it's ready for the next person. If students need textbooks, you need to make sure that, do you send that one table leader? Do you have half the classroom go at a time? Just making sure that you can be incredibly efficient and not waste any time trying to get those materials out to the students. Same thing with journals or books. Packets and worksheets, it's really easy if you just set the materials out in a easy to access place and they can grab it on their way to their seat. You have to decide how you want this done, and you have to practice this procedure regularly with your students so that way they know what's expected of them, they can get it done quickly, and you don't lose those precious minutes. All right, so seat signals. Again, I had mentioned these previously. I got a little ahead of myself. I was excited about this material. But two fingers crossed, like the letter R in sign language for the restroom, pinching your nose for a tissue. Here's what I forgot to mention. They're holding up a broken pencil, so you could just have like a stash of pencils and you could just exchange it with them. So you're not, again, losing that pace, that steam where you were at. You could just quickly exchange pencils with them, and then it's not a huge class disruption. And you're not having the noise of someone using an electric pencil sharpener in the middle of that discussion or that lecture or whatever you're doing at that time. So again, classroom jobs are really important. You could have specific table groups that are responsible for these. But here are some of the examples that I came up with previously. So Chromebook monitor, someone who passes back the graded work, somebody who answers the phone, somebody who makes sure that the date is always correct on the board, someone who reads the bulletins, that gets emailed to us a couple days a week. And it's nice just to have somebody else do that. It gives them practice reading out loud, and it gives us a chance to, take care of some other details or, kind of check around the room to see who's paying attention while someone else is reading. Doing the flag salute, we do like to do the flag salute every day during first period at the high school level. And then having table representatives, you could have them designated as the one who get the supplies and things like that. Exit routines are important. You do want to have some time for closure. So whether that is an exit ticket, so they actually are writing something about what they learned that day and they're going to hand that into you as they leave, or if you just want to set a timer for 2 minutes and say, talk to your table partner, talk to the person you're sitting next to, and tell them about what you learned today. Ask questions about what you learned today. That can be really powerful. Having them put the information in their own words is just a really great way to summarize what they've learned, and it really just helps reinforce everything that they've been dealing with. A motivational reflection, so this could be just a free write response at the end of class about something that they learned, something that inspired them. So you want to do that for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then you would have the cleanup procedure. So that's when my music would cue on with the Mission Impossible theme. Again, I have it for about 1 minute. About 1 minute before the class is supposed to be dismissed, that music cues off. It runs for 30 seconds. So it enables them to clean up their work area, push in their chairs, and then they're supposed to be standing behind their chairs ready. And then I have that last little 30 seconds to go over information with them. You can dismiss students by table, so you can be walking around, making sure that they've held up their end of the bargain as far as keeping the classroom clean, that all the Chromebooks have been returned. You could check in with your Chromebook helper, get a visual cue that they've actually done that and the students have held up that part of it. It is really important, since so many of us are sharing classrooms, that each one of us make sure that when we leave the classroom, it's at least the same that we found it, if not better. It could be really frustrating for us if we came in after a teacher was using the classroom before us, if we had to go around and pick up trash and straighten out the chairs and move things back to where they belong and erase stuff off of the board, gather up Chromebooks and put them back. So just think about how you would want the space to be left for you, and then try and hit that standard every day with your students. So you really need to encourage your students to work with you to make sure that everything is better than you found it. And if you are having an issue as we start this school year and you're sharing a classroom, then just bring it up to the high school deans and we can help you work through that with the other teachers that you're sharing the classroom with. All right, a really important thing that we're going to talk about today also is discipline. So discipline sometimes has really negative connotations, but it's really not just punishment and consequences. Lemov prefers to think of it as teaching students the right and successful way to do something. Teachers often set up a system of rewards and consequences, but it's really important that we also teach our students step by step how to be successful, how to have that successful behavior. So how do we want them to line up so they can get that reward? How do they enter the classroom? How do they take notes so that they can be successful? And that's more what discipline's goal should be. So classroom management is all the stuff that we've talked about today, but it's also using that consequence and reward to reinforce behavior. A lot of times what we call discipline is really just how we help manage. Management is very visible in our classroom culture, but we really don't always look at it the same way. We kind of miss its importance. If we over-rely on management and we just are always giving out consequences, we're really missing the point. If we can instead set up those procedures, set up those expectations ahead of time, we will be more successful. So if we're not just having to always, punish kids, but instead if we show them what we expect and we reward them or we praise them when they meet our expectations, that's going to eliminate a lot of problems right there. So one thing that we can have, one area that we can impact this is through control. So if you have clear commands, then students know what to do. We need to be firm and confident, but also respectful and civil to our students. We don't always have to sound like drill sergeants. We can get our point across with our tone of voice, with our posture, and we don't have to yell. So if you have clear commands, you can exert the control, and then you don't have to dole out a consequence for every little thing. You can save it for the issues that really need it. And you can just show the students that you believe that they're going to do what's right. Our influence. So if we want our students to succeed, we can inspire them. So we can inspire students to believe, to want to work, and to want to succeed for those intrinsic reasons. And that's how we can influence them. So we don't always need to have them working for that extrinsic reward, but if we can teach them the importance of doing these behaviors for their own benefit. This is less visible than getting students to behave, but instead it involves the kids helping them believe in themselves, and that actually is one of the biggest drivers of student success. And engagement. Champion teachers provide plenty of opportunities for students to get involved and lose themselves in productive, positive work. And this leaves them little time to engage in counterproductive behaviors. So if we are, helping them be successful as they enter the classroom, they're successfully completing their do now, and then we're transitioning to the next thing, and we just keep working on the things that we need to accomplish in a day, and there isn't that downtime, we're gonna have a lot less behavior issues because of the format that we have our classroom set up in. Once they start behaving as contributing members of the class, they can also start thinking of themselves as positively engaged and enthusiastic students as well. And that's what we want. We really want our kids to have that, positive image of themselves and realize that they can be successful, that they can learn. One thing that's really important is, as we are dealing with some of the discipline issues that can arise, is that we use the least invasive form of intervention. We don't need to jump straight to a suspension. That's not going to be helpful. But we have these little baby steps that we can use with students, and so we can escalate it. If they choose not to obey, then we have another step to go to. So one of the first things we can do is nonverbal interaction. We can use eye contact if a student is off task. We're not, messing with our flow of our instruction. We are just focusing our attention on a student who isn't making a good choice at that time. And a lot of time, just the presence of that teacher eye on them will be enough to encourage them to get back on task, get back, into the group activity that they're doing, get back on task with the discussion or the assignment that's ahead of them. If that doesn't work, then sometimes we can just say as a group, we're following along in our books. Just giving them that positive affirmation of what we're supposed to be doing as a gentle reminder to the group. We're not singling anybody out at this time. We can also use anonymous individual correction. So we could say, I need 2 more people to turn to page 75 so that we can start reading. The kids who are paying attention, who are on task, they already know that they're at the right page, they're doing what's expected of them. And this can just be an audible cue to those couple kids that haven't quite figured it out where they're supposed to be at. Sometimes, it might have been just an attention issue. They weren't paying attention when you gave the instructions. Again, that's why 100% compliance is so important. If you have all eyes on you, you can just check the room, scan it, make sure everyone's paying attention to you. But if somebody somehow was making eye contact with you and daydreaming and they didn't know what page to go to, giving an audible cue like we're all on page 75 can give them the information they need to be successful without calling them out, embarrassing them, and anything like that. Again, least invasive form. So we're just trying to give everyone the opportunity to catch up and join the class where we're supposed to be at. After that, it could be private individual correction. So as you're circulating around the classroom, it's really important to move so that you have access to all the students and you can kind of check in on where they're at. If I see, someone at the back corner, Quentin, he's not quite where we're at, I could, instead of calling his name out at the front of the class, Quentin, get on task. No. That's invasive. Instead, I could just meander over to him, just tap the desk in front of him and just say, Quentin, I need you to track me so you can learn. So again, quiet voice, just a quiet conversation between the two of you. The rest of the class doesn't even know what you're talking about, but Quentin knows that you saw that he was off task. And your expectation is that he's going to be following along. He's going to know what's going on. And so you just have that quiet correction with him. You could have lightning quick public correction. So again, this would not be your first stop. You've already made, several attempts, and then you can pull this one out. Quentin, I need your eyes. So if you already had that quiet conversation and we're still having some issues, then you could, use this public correction to just make sure that he knows where he needs to be. So you tell the student what to do. It can be efficient, it's effective, and you can move on. If there's still an issue, if the student continues to not be on task, to not be paying attention, to be showing some behaviors that are not acceptable, not meeting your expectations, that's when you deal with a consequence. So you aren't handing out lunch detentions at the first issue. You've done nonverbal intervention, positive group correction, anonymous individual correction, private individual correction, lightning quick public correction. That's 5 steps, and then you can pull out a consequence. It's best to solve these non-compliance issues quickly, but save those consequences for occasional use. If you have to use one, technique number 42, which we'll talk about in a minute, is called no warnings. and you can just use it for quick, calm, non-invasive consequences. Ignoring a misbehavior is not always the best action. If you ignore it, yes, it's not invasive, but if the kid thinks he can get away with it, he's going to keep doing it, and it's going to build, and then other kids are going to participate, and then you've lost it. Okay, so let's look at technique number 42, no warnings. So too often teachers will give a warning when addressing a student's behavior, but giving a warning isn't taking action. Warnings tell the students that the misbehavior is tolerated, that they can get by with a couple warnings, and then you'll actually do something. So this doesn't mean that you have to give out a consequence every single time a student doesn't meet your expectations, but the consequences can be overused, and the teachers instead can break down what they want the student to do and what they want the student to try again. Maybe if they're do it again, sit correctly in your chair. When teachers deliver a consequence, it needs to be a scaled system. So again, you don't want to jump straight to like a Thursday school or a Saturday school. Scale it out. Okay, because you failed to follow directions, you will be serving a lunch detention today. Okay, and that's after you've already done those first 5 steps. Okay, sometimes teachers will see a student misbehaving, and a lot of times they'll think that the kid is being defiant. But really, it could just be that the student doesn't understand what's going on. They don't exactly know how to follow a direction. Sometimes with our kids who have maybe a problem focusing, they could have, kind of wandered off for a minute, and now they're expected to be on task, and they don't know exactly where that is. With our English language learners, this could also be a concern. So you have to give clear and useful directions. If you say, don't get distracted, that's very vague. My mind wanders sometimes. I can't expect that students' minds will never wander. I can't just say, pay attention. Pay attention to what? Again, it's very vague. So, you need to teach them exactly what your expectations are. Eyes on me. Please place your pencils down and listen for the directions. So they have to be specific, and they give the students something to do. Please put your feet under the desk. You could be sequential, so give them a sequence of things you expect them to do. Please put your feet under the desk, put your pencil down, put your eyes on me. And it's something that you can observe. Did they listen to the steps that you gave them, and did they follow them? Okay, so they need to have that expectation of what to do. Some teachers, you just watch them walk in and all eyes are on them. They just have this presence in the classroom that the kids just really react to, and they just demand respect just with their sheer presence. Not all of us maybe have that ability, but there are some things that we can do with having a strong voice. So when we're interacting with students, we can have that control when we need it. So one of the first things is to have that economy of language. So it's best to use just a few simple words. If you just chatter on and you kind of get distracted and you just kind of keep talking to fill the void, kids can read that as you're nervous or you're not really in control. Instead, just focus on what's important and just make that one point. So this can be really helpful if a student is off task. You can just repeat. Please get out your notebook and turn to page 3. Again, very focused, very few words, but it's very clear. Another thing, don't talk over students. If you need the students to listen, expect 100% compliance. You are going to wait until you have every last student looking at me. So, you can say to your class, I need your eyes. I need your eyes focusing on me. I need your pencils down. If you are choosing to talk over students, the students are showing you that they're not respecting you, and you're showing them that you don't need that respect. If you're waiting for 100% compliance, then you're not having to try and talk over them. You're not going to lose your voice. Wait until there's no talking or rustling, okay? Another thing that you can do, don't engage. A lot of times teachers will try and get the students back on task, but the students will take you in a whole different direction. So in this example here, if you go up to a student and say, please take your foot off of Margaret's chair, the student might respond, well, she's pushing me. Okay, you don't want to engage that. Instead of, saying, oh, Margaret, are you doing this? Or saying something like, I'm not concerned with what Margaret's doing. Instead, just say, David, I asked you to take your foot off of Margaret's chair. And just go back again, using the least amount of words, using that word economy. Again, focusing on what the original task at hand was. The next thing you could do is square up and stand still. So if you have this posture where you have, you're standing tall, you're standing very erect, and just you have this confidence in your posture, you're standing still, and you're giving those directions. The kids are focusing at you very intently. So that can be a really important way to do this. The last one would be having that quiet power. So when you feel you're losing control, your instincts could sometimes lead you to speak louder and faster. And that really signals to the kids, oh, we've kind of riled her. Oh, she looks a little nervous, or maybe she's getting angry. And sometimes the kids like to bring out those characteristics in us, and instead we need to be counterintuitive to that and take some deep breaths. Just center yourself, get that posture going. Think about, the few words that you could use to convey what you need to, and just give them the instructions with those few words. Take some deep breaths, have that strong posture, and repeat it to them until they're on task. Okay. Having a positive framing. If your interventions with the students are framed with positive comments, a lot of times you'll be able to make that connection, and you'll be able to be more effective with the students. If you correct students in a positive way, it doesn't mean that you're avoiding these interventions. Instead, you're just giving them a chance to get back on task. All right, so positive reinforcement can be one of the most powerful tools that a teacher has, but it has to be implemented. You can't just praise a student for doing what's expected of them. Yay, you showed up today. Doesn't really work. Or, oh, good, you have your pencil today. The students are expected to come to class with their materials. So acknowledge them, thank them, but don't actually praise them for it. If you're just handing out praise like that, when a student actually does something that's praiseworthy, it kind of lowers the value of it. Save that praise for something exceptional. So make it very specific about what you're praising, and make it public, but also make it sincere. So that way the students get that pat on the back through that verbal praise. And it also sends a cue to the rest of the class like, oh, if I do this kind of thing, then the teacher will acknowledge me as well. So it gives them something to work towards. If we are going to have some criticisms, though, that is not something you want to broadcast to the whole class. That's something that you need to whisper. You need to use that least invasive, those steps there. All right, I'm going to have you in your groups work together on how would you deal with the disruption in a classroom. So I want you to think about maybe some of the least invasive ways that you can deal with an issue. How would you handle something that's happening in the classroom? So I'll give you a scenario, and then I want you to think about who's going to play the students that are having the issue, who's going to be the teacher, and who's going to be the rest of the class. Kind of brainstorm what the scenario is going to look like, and how the teacher's going to start with the least invasive methods and work out from there. So your scenario here is Stacy is talking while you're giving instructions. So Stacy is talking to her friend Stephanie while you're giving instructions. So what would you do in this scenario? And if you were to correct this behavior, what technique would you apply? Okay. So I'll go ahead and give you guys 5 minutes to look over this scenario and figure out exactly what you would do.